All right, very well. So let's start today's webinar. My name is Davide Terlingo. I'm head of international arts at the Arts Council. Welcome. And with me it's Lucy Tevlin, international arts officer at the Arts Council. So I will bring you through the key components of the co-funding award. What I'll try to do today is really give you a sense of what this program is about and what is the best way to approach an application to this program. I will not go through a detailed account of all the technical aspects of all the elements of this sort of complex funding program. If you have specific questions, it will probably be better to just write to us, contact us either by email or phone. And as I said, today is more to give you a general overview of the two strands of the co-funding award, and hopefully put you in the right path for a successful application. Okay, so the first thing to say probably is that the co-funding award is divided into strands. There is a strand 1 and strand 2. Okay, strand 1 is for organizations that have received a funding offer either for cooperation projects or European platforms. Okay, and so you can apply for activities that are starting in 2025 under these two strands of the Creative Europe program. While strand 2 is for organizations to apply in order to meet partners in preparation for an application to the cooperation projects only. Okay, so we'll go into more detail through on each strands in a moment. What I'm planning to do is to give you an overview of strand 1, an overview of strand 2, and then give you just general advice on how to approach Arts Council funding applications, and also what the priorities are for these awards. And you will be given a chance to ask questions at the end. Meanwhile, if you want to put some of these questions in the chat, I think Lucy can help me to track them at the end, or if you can just maybe ask them anyway at the end. So this is essentially what we're planning to do today. Okay, so we start with strand 1 first. Okay, strand 1 has been running now for about 8 years, so it's been a quite successful program around by the Arts Council. So, and it's really, I said, the award is only open to, first of all, organizations based in Ireland that have received an offer of funding this is, I think, an old slide, but in 2024. And so it's essentially this year, either as a lead coordinator or partner under the two particular strands of the Creative Europe programs. Okay, one is the cooperation projects or European platforms, not other strands of the Creative Europe programs. So only these two. Okay, and applications for the co-funding award can only be submitted by organizations that have received funding in the same year, so this year essentially, from the European authority. So you essentially cooperation projects and European platforms can run over multiple years, but you will not be able to apply to the co-funding award. Let's say if you receive a funding offer this year, you will not be able to apply to the co-funding award next year. Okay. Or if you received the last year, you wouldn't be able to apply this year. Okay. So it must be in the same calendar year of your offer from the European authority. Okay. So some of the most important points, which are usually connected with the main questions and inquiries we receive from organizations, are these two important points. Okay, so what is this really for? What can you apply for? So under the co-funding award strand 1, you can only apply for the costs that are directly related to the implementation of the Irish elements of your successful cooperation project or European platform. So you cannot apply for activities that are run, of course, by your partners. You can only apply for activities that are essentially part of what you listed under your Creative Europe application as part of your you as an Irish partner. Okay. So it's very important. So when you apply to the co-funding award, we need to see the evidence that these activities you're applying for are directly related to the original application, okay, that you submitted to Creative Europe. Now, please keep in mind that you say you cannot introduce new elements. For instance, if your application to Creative Europe included a series of residencies and talks and perhaps mentorship programs for artists, you cannot apply for something entirely new. Like even if it includes the same partners, you cannot apply for maybe a co-production, okay, with the partner. So it must be for the same activities that were listed in your original application. However, okay, you can expand on the original activities. So you can take this activity and expand it and seek also new partners in Ireland. And because ultimately the purpose of this strand is to deepen and strengthen, the elements of these European activities within Ireland, okay, with the Irish arts community and with the Irish audiences, okay. So that is important point to consider. The second important point to consider, which is sometimes a bit source of confusion, is how much you can apply for. Okay, so you can apply only for funding that is towards, as again, towards the Irish partner financial contribution, okay, to the project. And please keep in mind that this will be in a competitive context. Okay, what does it mean? Okay, so that, for instance, if the Irish partner budget is 50,000 euro for all the activities, as an example, and the portion of funding you receive from the European authority is 30,000 euro, okay, so essentially you can apply for a maximum of 20,000 euros. So this is really what you are eligible to apply. If you apply for more than that amount, your application will be deemed ineligible. So this is a very important point. And so, however, it's important to consider that when you apply, okay, we would expect to see as part of our assessment, which I'll be talking in a moment, we would be expecting to see a mix of different sources of income. And this is not just to fully compensate for the budget gap that you have, in your application, but we want to see the Arts Council money to both help you to deliver these programs, of course, but also to, as I mentioned before, to strengthen the impact that they will have in Ireland. Okay, so very important points to consider. Okay, so also what may you not apply for? There are 2 points in particular. Some of these points, they're really quite common across our funding programs. Now, some of you might be familiar with our funding programs, some others not, but I'll go through all this in a moment. But please keep in mind the 2 main points, which are here in green, that there is sometimes confusion because organizations that apply under co-funding often, or sometimes, but often receive funding, other Arts Council funding from other sources like strategic funding, arts grants funding. So it's very important that you made it clear in your application that you are not applying for activities that are already funded by the European Authority or by other funding agencies or, let's say, other programs of the Arts Council. Okay, so make it very clear. And if there is some sort of overlap, make it very clear that this is captured in your budget to submit it as part of this application. Also, I repeat it again that you cannot apply for activities that were not outlined in your Creative Europe application, okay? So this is why, in a moment, we'll go through the required supporting material. This is why we require all these documents, because we cross-reference your application submitted to Creative Europe with your co-funding application, because we want to make sure that I said, we don't create any sort of confusion overlaps in supporting we give. Other points, as I say, they are very common across our funding programs because they're just things we don't usually support. We don't support non-artistic activities, heritage costs, or academic activities. We do not support capital costs. This is not to support the ongoing core cost of the organization. We don't support activities that would be more appropriate for other funding bodies, such as Culture Ireland. particularly let's say the touring and dissemination of work abroad. Okay, activities that of course don't fit the purpose of the award. Activities that perhaps say would be more suited to other Arts Council funding programs. We don't support charity fundraising activities and activities that have already been assessed, okay, by the Arts Council. So in this case could be maybe under strategic funding or other funding programs. Okay, these are common elements across all our funding programs. Okay, what is required as mandatory supporting material for this program? There is a section in the guidelines that is very important to, I think, to tick. Okay, there is quite a large of applications submitted to the Arts Council that unfortunately we cannot assess because some of the required supporting material is not included with the application. That happens unfortunately more often than it should sometimes. And in this case, okay, we need a copy of the European Authority decision letter. Okay, this is important for us because we need to verify that you received the funding offer from them. We need a copy of your submitted Creative Europe application because, as I mentioned before, we will cross-reference it with your co-funding application. We need a copy of the submitted Creative Europe detailed budget form, again, because this will help us to assess the feasibility of your proposal, but also to have a clear idea of, you know, the amount of resources that you're requiring overall and how it fits within the broader scope of European application. Also, you will need to submit a copy of the budget template that you can download from our website. And so this is something that our team has created to sort of standardize a bit and help us to compare application in a more reasonable manner. So that is something that you must submit. And of course, if you're an application, you intend to involve other partners, new partners that were not listed in the original application, then please include evidence of this. If there are additional resources, include some evidence, either in the forms of letters, emails, of memorandum of understanding with these additional partners and resources. Okay, so please submit only this material. There's no need to submit other material that is not listed here. It's not necessarily beneficial unless you have a very clear reason to do so. But this is something that is extremely important for us to assess the application. But also, if you do not submit this material, your application will not be assessed. Okay, so ineligible application will not be really looked at, essentially. Okay. So we move now to Strand 2. I will go back to the assessment process for Strand 1 and Strand 2 later. Okay, so now just to give a sense of what each different strand is for. Okay, so please bear with me if you have maybe still a bit of doubts about Strand 1. I'll go back to it. So Strand 2, what is it for? So Strand 2 is in a way a bit simpler strand, because it is really for Irish organizations, as I say, that are seeking support towards meeting with potential European partners, okay, in preparation of a cooperation projects application only. So this is not for European platforms. This is only for cooperation projects. Okay, there is a reason why this is so, but this is important to consider. So these meetings are more, not so much for testing the ground or vaguely exploring the potential for partnership, but more like to help you to deliver something that is already happening. Okay, so something that is to progress, already in your perhaps in your plans with your partners. Okay. Also, very helpfully here, we have been given a list of all the countries and territories that are eligible to be considered, for as partners and where the travel can take place. So these are all essentially regions, countries, and territories that can be included in European application. Therefore, they are also eligible under our Strand 2 application. If you have questions about this, okay, this information is really provided to us by Create Europe Desk. And so, as I said, this is, we can, anyway, if you have a question, please let us know and we let you know if the country is eligible or not. Also, to keep in mind that the maximum amount for Strand 2 is 2,000 euro, because there is no maximum amount in Strand 1, but there is in Strand 2. And that this Strand is really there to cover the cost related to travel, subsistence, and accommodation only. Okay, so it's not for other artistic activities, or it is just there, as I say, to help you to advance your plans. Okay, hopefully straightforward so far. Now, as this is something really that is more sort of a new, and Strand 2 is still being proposed by the EACEA Council as a pilot program. We're still exploring it and see how effective it is and what is the best way to deliver it. But just to give you some advice of what we are looking for here, when you provide information in your application form under your proposal, okay, please help us to understand essentially what you're going to do, okay, when you meet the partners, what is the focus of these meetings, and please help us to understand who are not only the partner organization who is hosting the meeting, but also who is, the cohort of organizations that will be part of the Create Europe cooperation project. And also a sense of the timeline. When are you expecting? Okay, so to what stage of development your plans are? Okay, when you're expected to submit the Create Europe application. Okay, so it's important because this will be in a very competitive context, and so we probably will not be able to support all applications. And the clearer your plans are, the essentially the most probably likely to succeed the application will be. And the mandatory supporting material for Strand 2, okay, is again, it's a bit simpler, but is a copy of an up-to-date CV for the applicants and the proposed partners. Now, if the applicant and the partners are better intended as organizations, you can just provide a link to the organizations, to your and other partners organization websites, okay? Because that is just for us to help us understand who organizational people involved in these discussions are, as we might not be familiar particularly with organizations based abroad. Also, of course, you need to provide information about the costs, okay, the travel, accommodation, subsistence costs. This needs to be in a separate detailed budget, okay, it needs to be separate. And you can have two options here. You can create your own budget for Strand 2, not for Strand 1, but for Strand 2, yes, you can, because it's much simpler, in a way, representation of costs, okay? But you also have the option to use, again, the co-funding, budget template that is available for download on the website. It might be perhaps a bit of overkill because it's a far more complex template, but you can use it. It's there, and there is a section which includes travel, accommodation, subsistence costs in that template anyway. And finally, important evidence of the engagement that you have with European partners. So this is in the form of letters of invitation, formal emails, or anything else that can help us to understand really how formal these relationships are. Okay, so this was a general overview of Strand 1, a general overview of Strand 2. We now move into just general information which is applicable to both strands, and that is generally applicable to all Arts Council funding programs, okay? But in particular to these funding programs, there are a few things to consider. Eligibility. We really want to make sure that there is no application eligible, because that happens, as I say, quite regularly. Okay, so first of all, we will not assess your application if you miss the deadline. That happens quite often, okay? There is no way in which we can accommodate for late applications unless there was a really technical issue on our side, okay? Essentially, if you miss the deadline, your application cannot be submitted. Your application must be submitted through online services. there is no use in sending us an applications by email, okay, because we cannot process it. We cannot really do anything with it. So it needs to be submitted through our online services. If you fail to complete all sessions of the application, your application will be deemed ineligible simply because essentially we don't have all the information and to assess it, okay? And that happens sometimes. Make sure that all sections are completed. So of course, if you do not meet the criteria that I listed before, the eligibility criteria, okay, so I'm not going to go through them, but this list of eligibility is included in the guidelines anyway, so you can look at them in more detail. Also important, if you apply for more than the maximum amount allowed, which I discussed before under Strand 2 or Strand 1, okay? So as I mentioned before, Strand 1 does not have a maximum amount overall, but you have a specific amount that you are only allowed to apply for, if that makes sense. Okay, if you have a question, please ask me if it's not clear. But if you exceed these amounts, your application will not deem eligible simply because in a way it will not be considered as feasible anyway. If you apply, say, for activities that do not fit the purpose, or again, that's kind of across all our funding programs, so it's pretty straightforward. But important again, if you fail to provide all supporting material, that will be immediately obvious, and we will simply deem your application eligible. Okay, and that's it. Okay, and then of course, if it's better suited to other Arts Council funding programs. So these are very important. We keep repeating all the time because I say just the likelihood that a few applicants will in the end be deemed ineligible whenever we run our funding programs. Okay, now we go a bit more into really what are we trying to achieve with this funding program. So in general, just to have a sense really what we are looking for, so that can guide you perhaps how to submit the application. What we want to see when the Arts Council money is really there to, let's say, first of all, recognize the value of international practice and relationships, and is something that we want to prioritize when we look for evidence that organizations, as I say, recognize this value. And it's not just about therefore taking from the partners, but also a sense of mutual cooperation and exchange in the applications. So internationalism is a value, okay, that we promote in this funding program. But in addition, and in complement to these particular aspects of the co-funding, of course, as part of all the funding process we run at the Arts Council, we are really want to prioritize also activities that demonstrate the promotion and development of good practice in the area of audience development, along with the deepening and growing of public engagement in Ireland. Therefore, how the international and the national will, combine together to benefit the arts community and the public in Ireland. Okay, so it's quite important, of course, because that's the remit of the Arts Council. And the third one is activities that contribute to ensuring that the arts sector is skilled, resourceful, and committed to its own renewal. So that is not only about public engagement, but because some activities in your proposal, I'm sure, will perhaps not have any aspects of public engagement, as I mentioned before, like residencies or perhaps just mentoring for artists. But we want also to make sure that these international activities help the art sector in Ireland, to grow and perhaps, and be better resourced, because ultimately that's also what it's all about. In essence, essentially, we want to see through the co-funding applications how our supports will be used to extend and multiply the benefits in Ireland of your application. Okay, now I move directly to the assessment criteria, because we have only two criteria for our assessment rather than the usual three. There is a reason why I put these assessment criteria just after the priorities, because just to give a sense of how important it is to pay attention to this, because when we assess the applications based on these criteria, we essentially have a specific method of going through these bullet points and seek evidence that these priorities are being met. Okay, so the two criteria are one is the purpose of the award, essentially. So we write a narrative, an assessment that is reflected of this. criteria. And we'll be looking for evidence that say that your proposal, okay, is addressing these 3 points. Okay, it's very important. And the other criteria is feasibility. Okay, so these are the only 2 criteria. And as part of feasibility, we look at the track record of the people, organizations involved in managing, administration, delivery of the project. Of course, that's again refers back to the supporting material we were asking before. The extent to which the applicants demonstrate the provision of course, equitable conditions and remuneration for the artist, very important for us. The extent of involvement or commitment of partners. Okay, we want to see usually risk sharing and equal commitment in this both ways. Okay, in these partnerships, it's not just about taking or just giving. Say that there's a clear sense that partners are fully invested into each other. Say work. The proposed budget. So the budget will help us to obviously have a sense of the financial planning. Other source of income, because usually we consider that as a good sense of sustainable financial planning or good financial planning. And the availability of other resources, so not just financial resources, but also a sense of do you have the right structures in place to deliver the activities that you are proposing, studios or administrative resources, and so on. Because we want to make sure also that the artists involved are given an environment that is suitable, okay, for what they are asked to do or deliver. And finally, the proposed timetable or schedule, okay, so that we have a sense of how this proposal is going to unfold over sometimes 2-3 years. Okay, so it's quite important. Okay, so we do not assess the artistic quality, because it's one of the, I think, probably the only funding program the Arts Council, simply because we accept that successful applicants have, under the Creative Europe programs, have already gone through a rigorous assessment program. And if you have been successful, that's evidence enough of the strong quality of your artistic activities and artistic vision. So these are the only 2 programs that, criteria that we use for assessment. What we do assess in the assessment, we create a written narrative and then a score for each criteria, which we will then decide who essentially will be funded or who won't be funded. It's going to be very competitive funding program. Unfortunately, we have relatively small budget of around 190,000 euro, which is the same amount we had last year. So I'd say it's going to be quite challenging and competitive, okay, to apply under this funding program. So finally, just to conclude, some key dates. Okay, so the deadline for applications on the 5th of December, sorry, I repeat, 5th of December 2024. And if you have questions, so this is something that I've taken from our website. So if you go on our website, you can find contact details for asking inquiries. You can download the guidelines and the budget template, okay, that I mentioned before. If you want to apply, say you need to go through the online services, so you will find that there is just a link to initiate the process. And just to give a sense of the timeline, we are expecting to announce the funding decisions towards the 10th of February. Okay, so that's at the moment in our project plan. That is the time frame. And that really concludes the presentation. So